Click here to subscribe our channel. Do not forget to press the bell icon to get regular updates of free videos.
So this is an orientation class for semester 4 economics honors, and this is first class for intermediate macrosecond. But before starting that intermediate macrosecond, I will just take few minutes to explain what we are offering in semester 4. So at this point in semester 4 course, you will be getting lecture for the intermediate microsecond. This intermediate microsecond, obviously there will be two sections. One section will be the market structure and game theory, and the second section is general economy and the welfare, and the reference book is basically same, that means Nicholson and Snyder and Halverian, and one chapter from the Osborne. Then intermediate macrosecond. In intermediate macrosecond there has been change in terms of unit as well as in terms of the reference, so I will be explaining that in detail. Then third will be introductory econometrics. So these are the three core paper, and for all these three core paper you will be getting online lectures. The format is actually that we conduct offline classes and record that class as it is and provide it to the online students, but due to pandemic and due to COVID there is no offline classes going on, so we are just recording it and providing it to you. So in the near future again there was expectation after second wave that there will be offline classes resuming, but now given that we are now facing this third wave in the form of Omicron, so don't expect that in the month of February or March there will be offline classes. So no problem with that. The format is basically online. On that online lecture will be getting lectures for all topics, notes, previous year question, their solution. So you will be getting lectures, and those lectures obviously it will vary from subject to subject, approximately say 25 to 30 lecture will be covering micro. Then that portal will also be showing all notes for all chapters, then previous year question and their solution. Clear? So for all the topic, and you can repeat that lecture. It is not that it is unlimited, but you can see any particular lecture twice or thrice. I don't think there is any problem related to that. Enough bandwidth has been given related to that. So because there has been change in the syllabus of the intermediate macrosecond, so I will be starting this for intermediate macrosecond, because that intermediate macrosecond syllabus has been revised. So intermediate macrosecond. First of all, you can write down the content, that means what are the various topics that we have to cover. So in that content you can write unit number 1. Unit number 1 is economic growth. In fact it is economic growth models, you can say economic growth models, and in that economic growth model there are various growth model that we have to explain, including solo model of economic growth, then Romer model of economic growth, and another will be Harrod's model. although there are various growth models, but as per syllabus you have to read only Solow model, Romer model and Harrod's model. Earlier this Solow model was referred from Mankiw, chapter number 7 and 8, but now there has been a change, and in that change you have to refer to the reference book of Jones. So for Solow model it will be chapter number 2 and 3.2. So Jones mein chapter number 2 and chapter number 3.2 is basically dealing with Solow model. Then chapter number 4 and chapter number 5 is basically dealing with a Romer model, and Harrod's model we have to refer from reference book A-Sane. So for Solow model it is chapter number 2 and 3.2. First chapter is basically introduction, it talks about just economic growth, so you can safely ignore that part. The first chapter, that means what we are going to study in the economic growth model, why there are different models, what is the meaning of economic growth. So when we say that economy is growing, that means just for example if I say that the growth rate of India is 6.5, so it is growth rate in GDP, but the better indicator of growth will be GDP per capita. So there are two important growth indicators, one is the growth in GDP, other is the growth in GDP per capita. So what determines the growth in the GDP? So different model highlights different dimensions, different aspect. Solow model will simply explain that technology, saving rate, labor force, they determine the growth. That means there are different factors that affect the economic growth rate. Out of these different models, we will divide different models into broadly two parts. One is the exogenous growth theory, other is the endogenous growth theory. Exogenous means if I say that the growth depends upon technical progress growth rate, but without explaining what determines the technical progress growth rate, then it will be called as exogenous growth model. That means symbolically if I say that growth is a function of, it is a function of saving rate, it is a function of population growth rate, it is a function of technical progress growth rate. That means economic growth depend upon these factors, but what determines these factors has not been explained. We simply consider saving rate to be a given variable, we consider technical progress growth rate as a given number. That means we simply assume that technology is progressing at a rate of 2.5%. Without explaining what determines the technical progress growth rate, then it will be exogenous growth theory. But when we explain the endogenous, so when you explain the endogenous growth theory, then there you explain growth as a function of saving rate, population growth rate, technical progress growth rate. Then you go on further to explain that this technical progress growth rate is a function of how much labor force is going to create ideas, what is productivity of research and so on. So those aspects will be explained in the Romer model. So Romer model is an example of endogenous and Solow model is an example of exogenous growth theory. So when we will explain in detail, the things will become clear. So first unit, the change is basically this, I explained. Earlier it was a Mankiw. So when you refer to the previous year question, you will find some question जो current syllabus में अब relevant नहीं रह जाएगा, because those questions were basically based from the Mankiw book, और अब आपको रेफर करना है जोन्स की बुक. रोमर मॉडल की रीडिंग वही है, बट सोलो मॉडल की रीडिंग डिफरेंट हो गई. क्लियर? अनदर इंपॉर्टेंट change is unit number 2. This unit number 2 is business cycle. This is business cycle. Now this business cycle is basically, you can say in this part we are explaining what causes business cycle. So what are the reasons, how we can explain business cycle. So that business cycle has been explained by new classical economist. It has been explained in terms of real business cycle. So what causes output to fluctuate? In the first model, in the first unit we are determining what determine the output. In the second model we are basically explaining what causes output to fluctuate, what is the reason for fluctuation in output. So that point will be explained in this second unit, and for that purpose you have to read only chapter number 17 Gordon, chapter number 17 Gordon. Clear? So unit number 2 is ठीक है, ये करंट जो सिलेबस है वो अपडेटेड है, यू कैन सी ऑन डी स्कूल वेबसाइट. ठीक है, लास्ट जो डेट ऑफ मीटिंग है दिसंबर 2021. सो इट हैज़ बीन अपलोडेड. दैट मीन्स जो करंट ईयर का सिलेबस है, करंट सेशन का सिलेबस है, वो डिटरमाइंड है. एंड इन दैट यू फाइंड mention of unit number 1. So that unit number 1 is economic growth, Harrod-Domar model, Solow model, golden rule, technological change. That means there are various dimensions within the Solow model. Then second is business cycle, chapter number 17 Gordon. The third unit is open economy. Third unit is open economy. Related to open economy, I will say that this unit earlier it used to be in semester 3, but अब ये semester 3 की जगह semester 4 में explain कर रहे हैं. और semester 4 में माइक्रो इकोनॉमिक फाउंडेशन का टॉपिक होता था जो आपने semester 3 में पढ़ लिया. तो माइक्रो इकोनॉमिक फाउंडेशन दैट इज कंजम्पशन, इन्वेस्टमेंट, डिमांड फॉर मनी, वो आपने अब semester 3 में पढ़ लिया जो पहले semester 4 में होता था. तो सेमेस्टर 4 और 3 से एक यूनिट इंटरचेंज हो गए. ओपन इकोनॉमी 3 से 4 में आ गया और माइक्रो इकोनॉमी फाउंडेशन सेमेस्टर 4 से सेमेस्टर 3 में चला गया. एंड फॉर दिस ओपन इकोनॉमी रेफरेंस बुक विल बी डॉर्नबुश एंड फिशर एंड सैल्वाटोर. सो फ्यू चैप्टर्स फ्रॉम डॉर्नबुश एंड फिशर एंड फ्यू चैप्टर्स फ्रॉम सैल्वाटोर, बट इट विल बी एन इम्पॉर्टेंट यूनिट. दैट मीन्स इट विल टेक सम टाइम टू कवर एज वेल एज यूनिट नंबर 1. एंड then unit number 4 is monetary policy and fiscal policy. Monetary policy and fiscal policy, and for that monetary policy and fiscal policy you have to refer few chapters from Blanchard. So 24 to 26, chapter number 24, 25 and 26, and one chapter from Mishkin. Clear? So this is basically your content for semester 4. First unit is growth model, second unit is business cycle, third unit is open economy, fourth unit is monetary policy and fiscal policy. So your references basically include Jones, A.K. Sen, Gordon, Dornbush and Fisher, Salvatore and Blanchard and Mishkin. Clear? चेंज भी क्लियर है सेमेस्टर 3 और सेमेस्टर 4 के अंदर. ये थर्ड यूनिट के अंदर डिफरेंस है. थर्ड यूनिट अर्लियर इट यूज्ड टू बी इन सेमेस्टर 3, नाउ इट इज़ इन सेमेस्टर 4. और सोलो मॉडल की जो रेफरेंस बुक है वो डिफरेंट है, इसलिए जब आप 10 ईयर करेंगे तो 10 ईयर को थोड़ा केयरफुली स्टडी करना है. उस 10 ईयर में अगर आपको माइक्रो इकोनॉमी फाउंडेशन के क्वेश्चन दिखते हैं तो ऑब्वियसली वो आपने सेमेस्टर 3 में कर लिया. विल ट्राई टू फिल्टर दैट आउट. ठीक है, बट कुछ क्वेश्चन अपलोडेड होंगे साइट के ऊपर भी और बुकलेट के अंदर भी है. देन द एग्जामिनेशन पैटर्न. In this examination pattern there will be 2 sections. So your part A, that means question paper will be divided into 2 parts. Part A will have a 7 question of 5 marks. It will have 7 question of 5 marks, and you have to attempt any 6. So 6 into 5, 30 marks will be section A. Clear? Now out of the 7 question, as this reading list suggests, out of 7 question in part A, 3 will be from unit number 1. तो इस 7 क्वेश्चन का ब्रेकअप दे रहे हैं. फ्रॉम यूनिट नंबर 1 you will have 3 question, From unit number 2 you will have 2 question, and unit number 3 and 2 from unit number 3. 3 will be from unit number 1, 2 from unit number 3, 2 from unit number 3. So this unit number 3, 2 question, and after that unit number 2 and 4 combined, 2 or 4 combined, 2 from unit 3 and 2 from unit 4. ठीक है, जो रिमेनिंग क्वेश्चन हो जाएंगे वो यूनिट नंबर 2 और 4 के होंगे. सो फॉर फर्स्ट यूनिट 3 क्वेश्चन, फॉर थर्ड यूनिट 2 क्वेश्चन. दैट मीन्स फॉर इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ मॉडल एंड दी ओपन इकोनॉमी उनका वेटेज ज़्यादा होगा. देन पार्ट बी will have 4 question of 15 marks. 4 question of 15 marks, and students are required to attempt any 3. So it is 3 into 15, 45 marks. So section B 45 marks, section A 30 marks, 75 marks का आपका पेपर है. And if you want to know the breakup for this section B, so section B states that is part B, 4 question of 15 marks, out of which students are required to attempt any 3. Out of 4 question in part B, 1 will be from unit number 1, 1 from unit number 2 and 4, and 1 from unit number 3. Clear? 1 will be from unit number 1, 1 will be from unit number 2 and 4 combined, and 1 from unit number 3. The fourth question can be from anywhere. ठीक है, तो ऑब्वियसली फर्स्ट यूनिट और थर्ड यूनिट का 1-1 क्वेश्चन रहेगा. बिजनेस साइकिल और मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी, फिस्कल पॉलिसी कंबाइंड से 1 क्वेश्चन, एंड दैट फोर्थ क्वेश्चन कुड बी फ्रॉम एनीवेयर. यूजुअली इट इज फ्रॉम ओपन इकोनॉमी और फ्रॉम ग्रोथ मॉडल. ठीक है, उनमें कंटेंट ज़्यादा है. बट दिस पैटर्न विल बी फॉलोड इफ देयर विल बी ऑफलाइन एग्जाम. नाउ इट स्टेट्स इन केस ऑफ ओपन बुक एग्जाम, out of 6 question 2 would be from unit number 1, 2 would be from unit number 3, and remaining 2 would be from unit number 2 and 4 combined. Clear? So in case of open book exam, given this third wave, is again a likelihood that you have to give this semester 4 exam also in the form of open book. ठीक है, तो you are familiar with that pattern of exam now. So this is basically the content and the pattern of examination. Now we can start with the first model of first unit, which is economic growth model, and within that economic growth model we can explain the solo model first. So it is unit number 1, which is economic growth. You can say it is economic growth model. Now before explaining any specific growth model, I will just explain the meaning of this economic growth. So when we explain economic growth for any particular country, it is a growth in GDP, growth in the total production. So if an economy is able to produce more of output, then we say that there is growth, and the rate at which economy will be able to produce new output, that will be the economic growth rate. So economic growth is indicated by, so there are certain indicators, and those indicators are, one will be the GDP, but the better indicator is GDP per capita, because suppose GDP doubles and population also doubles, then the per capita income will remain same. So if per capita income will remain same, then the standard of living is not improving. So the better indicator of growth is increase in GDP per capita. So other indicator is GDP per capita. You will represent GDP by y, and when you write GDP per capita, denote it by small y. So small y will be referred here as y upon L, where L is referred as population. उसे आप लेबर फोर्स के फॉर्म में रीड करेंगे, बट वहाँ लेबर फोर्स और पॉपुलेशन को इक्विवेलेंट कंसीडर करें जस्ट फॉर सिंप्लीफिकेशन, although labor force is not entire population. So GDP and this is GDP per capita. तो जहाँ भी per capita में कन्वर्ट करना होगा वहाँ स्मॉल y या स्मॉल k लिख रहे हैं, जैसे कैपिटल पर कैपिटा लिखना हो, और एग्रीगेट वैल्यू अगर लिखनी है तो उसको कैपिटल में लिखिएगा. नाउ व्हेन वी एक्सप्लेन एनी पर्टिकुलर मॉडल like solo model, and just remember the basic idea of this model. The solo model is basically designed to explain how capital stock, labor force and technology interact and how their interaction determine the output. I repeat, model is basically designed to show how stock of capital, labor force and technology, they interact in an economy and their interaction determine the growth of output. Now if you want to put it in terms of equation, then we say that output, when you write y, it basically represents GDP. You can call it simply output or GDP. This output is basically a function of, it is basically a function of capital and labor. So this is your aggregate production function. This will be basically your aggregate production function. When you write a specific form of this production function, suppose in front of this I write A capital to the power alpha, labor to the power 1 minus alpha. So it means this output is a function of three things now. This A will represent technology, K is representing stock of capital and L is representing labor force. Clear? So production is basically a function of three things as per this model, which is technology, capital stock and labor force. So output is determined by technology, capital and labor force. So this is a familiar, you are familiar in micro also, this is your Cobb-Douglas production function. तो ये aggregate production function economy का, and this is explained in terms of Cobb-Douglas production function. And you can notice one thing, that if you write function in this form, then it is also representing constant returns to scale. Constant returns to scale means if you increase all inputs in a certain proportion, then output will also increase in the same proportion. So if you increase capital and labor both by let us say 10%, then output will also increase by 10%. Sum of power यहाँ equal to 1 आ रहा है. So it is constant returns to scale. So if you say that output is determined by technology, capital and labor force, it means the growth in output will be determined by growth in technology, growth in capital stock and growth in labor force. So if there is growth in technology or growth in capital stock, that is stock of capital is being accumulated in the economy, or if there is more labor force due to higher population growth rate, then GDP in the economy will also increase. So this is your production function basically, but you have written that growth is basically indicated by two things. One is the GDP, other is the GDP per capita. रिमेंबर यहाँ पे अगर कभी किसी इक्वेशन में a की वैल्यू गिवन नहीं है, जैसे अगर हमने इसे को 1 कंसीडर कर लिया, तो फिर फंक्शन में सिर्फ लिखेंगे कैपिटल टू द पावर अल्फा, लेबर टू द पावर 1 माइनस अल्फा. इफ यू कन्वर्ट दिस इक्वेशन इन टर्म्स ऑफ पर कैपिटा, देन y डिवाइडेड बाय l. सो a कैपिटल टू द पावर अल्फा, लेबर टू द पावर 1 माइनस अल्फा अपॉन l करना है. एंड इन प्लेस ऑफ दिस y by l, now this y by l you can write it by small y. So small y is equal to, that is GDP per capita is equal to, if you simplify it here, it will be a capital to the k by l to the power alpha हो जाएगा. ठीक है, अगर आप इसको सिंप्लीफाई करते हैं और k by l को रीड करना है, दिस k by l, जैसे हमने y by l लिखा है तो उसको क्या पड़ा, y आउटपुट है, तो ये आउटपुट पर कैपिटा हो गया, जीडीपी पर कैपिटा, तो k इज कैपिटल स्टॉक, उसको लेबर से डिवाइड कर दिया तो वो कैपिटल पर कैपिटा हो गया. सो विल राइट y इज a, नाउ स्मॉल k टू द पावर अल्फा, स्मॉल k टू द पावर अल्फा. ठीक है, तो जब आप रेफरेंस बुक पढ़ रहे हैं तो उसके अंदर जहां जहां इक्वेशन के अंदर आपने सिर्फ ये कैपिटल टू द पावर अल्फा गिवन है तो उसने a की वैल्यू को 1 कंसीडर किया हुआ है. ठीक है, लाइक इफ यू रीड द बेसिक सोलो मॉडल, द फंक्शन बेसिकली सेज output as a function of capital labor, capital to the power alpha, labor to the power 1 minus alpha. That means we have assumed that a value is equal to 1. Clear? Now, तो प्रोडक्शन फंक्शन को आपको एग्रीगेट के फॉर्म में गिवन है, उसे पर वर्कर में कन्वर्ट करना है. आई विल जस्ट गिव एन एग्जांपल. सपोज इन न्यूमेरिकल प्रॉब्लम aggregate production function is given as y equal to k to the power 0.5 L to the power 0.5. तो ये aggregate production function हो गया. You have to convert it in terms of the per worker. So what you will do, y upon L will be equal to k to the power 0.5 L to the power 0.5 upon L करना है. And y by L is small y, and if you convert it here it will be k by L to the power 0.5, which means k by L is small k to the power 0.5. Clear? And you can say it is under root k. तो अगर ये प्रोडक्शन फंक्शन एग्रीगेट है तो उसका पर वर्कर फॉर्म ये हो जाएगा. यहाँ पे कोई नंबर अगर लिखा होता लेट अस से 2, तो फिर ये 2 अंडर रूट के रह जाएगा. दिस फंक्शन एक्चुअली मीन्स दैट इफ द स्टॉक ऑफ कैपिटल लेट अस से 100, then the output per worker will be 10. Output is a function of capital. Output is basically here a function of capital. So production function is basically the solo model is designed to explain how capital stock, labor force and technology, these three will interact in an economy and how their interaction will be determining the output. Now when we explain the model, to explain that model we will be building this solo model in a series of steps. In a series of steps, it means there are 3 factors here. In the first step we consider only capital as variable, keeping labor force and technology constant. So if technology and labor force is constant, technology or labor force are constant, then this output will grow only because of capital accumulation. So as economy will accumulate more capital, as economy will have more plant and machinery, economy will be able to produce more of output. So in the first step we keep only capital variable remaining to constant. Then we make labor force also variable by introducing population growth rate, and in the third step we make technology also variable by introducing the technical progress growth rate. So by in a series of steps we will be building this model. So we have to basically focus on the what will be the conclusion, that means what determine the growth rate, whether growth rate is determined by or long term growth rate is determined by saving rate, which is basically determining the stock of capital, or population growth rate or technical progress growth rate. तो यहाँ से बेसिकली आपको ये बिगिन करना है मॉडल के फॉर्म में. इस मॉडल को एक्सप्लेन करने के लिए अलग अलग बुक में अलग अलग डिस्क्रिप्शन दिए गए, बट सिंस यू हैव टू रेफर जोन्स, सो यू हैव टू एक्सप्लेन दिस सोलो मॉडल अकॉर्डिंग टू जोन्स. क्लियर? तो ये फंक्शन हो जाएगा, याद रखिएगा. पहले तो फंक्शन का फॉर्म ये यूजुअली फंक्शन होगा, ज़्यादातर न्यूमेरिकल केस में आपको कॉम्प्लेक्स प्रोडक्शन फंक्शन दिए जाएंगे, बिकॉज दिस इज रिप्रेजेंटिंग कांस्टेंट रिटर्न्स टू scale. Remember, there is constant returns to scale, but there is diminishing return to a factor. Diminishing return to a factor means if you increase only capital in a certain proportion, then output will not increase in the same proportion. There will be diminishing return to capital, but there will be constant returns to scale. When I say scale, it means you change all the inputs, and when you discuss diminishing return to a factor, you change only that factor, keeping all other factor constant. Clear? तो प्रोडक्शन फंक्शन को बेसिकली एक्सप्लेन करना है. सो व्हेन यू राइट इट और एक्सप्लेन इट इन टर्म्स ऑफ द फंक्शन, So y as a function of k, it will be showing diminishing return. Y as a function of k. Clear? Yes, for example, if you write y is equal to under root k, so when you write capital stock as 100, then output corresponding to that will be 10. But if capital stock as 200, that means you double the capital stock, then output will not double. Under root 200 is not 20. Clear? So there will be diminishing return. Diminishing return means the slope is declining. ये slope decrease होता रहेगा. And slope of production function, is nothing but marginal product of capital. It is marginal productivity of capital. Slope of production function is marginal productivity of capital. That means if you differentiate the function, you will get slope of the production function. But when you differentiate the function with respect to capital, you will be getting marginal productivity of capital. Clear? So this is your first, we can say, tool, which is in the form of aggregate production function. Now what determines the stock of capital? We are interested in knowing that. ये तो simply relationship हो गया कि if stock of capital is 100, then output will be this. If stock of capital is 200, then output will be this. But question is, what determines the stock of capital? What causes the stock of capital to change? So at any given point of time, we have a stock of capital, say capital upon labor. At any given point of time, you have a stock of capital. Say stock of capital in the year 2022. So I will write all numbers as for 2022. So there is a stock of capital in 2022, and we are interested in knowing what will be the stock of capital in 2023. So what causes the change? Remember, in the first step we have considered labor force as constant. So if you consider labor force as constant, that means labor force of 2022 is equal to labor force of 2023. तो t period, t plus 1 period, दोनों का labor force same है, denominator same हो गया. So whatever be the change in this small k will be determined by change in this capital K. But that capital K is stock of plant and machinery. So how that stock of plant and machinery will change? Two things are important. One, if you don't buy any new machinery, you don't set up any new plant, then those plants will be used in the production function, and due to depreciation its value will fall. So depreciation will reduce the stock. Depreciation will reduce the stock. But what will be the rate of depreciation? So we are simply considering that depreciation is at a particular rate, let us say 20%. So 0.2 of the stock of capital will get depreciated every year. So depreciation का amount ये हो जाएगा delta into k, d अगर depreciation rate है, and the stock will increase. It will increase because of investment. Investment is basically addition to the stock of capital goods. Suppose stock of capital goods today in 2022, the stock of capital is 400, and in 2023 if the stock of capital increases from 400 to 700, then how much is the addition? Addition of 300. So that 300 will be referred as investment of that period. So investment is addition to the stock of capital goods. Clear? So due to investment, stock of capital will increase, and in a two sector model, investment is equal to savings, and saving is basically a fraction of income. So in place of investment you can also write saving. So a part of income will be saved. So income in terms of per capita y, a part of it will be saved, a part will be spent on consumption. So investment will increase the stock, depreciation will reduce the stock. If investment is more, depreciation is less, then if investment is more and depreciation less, then stock will increase. It means stock for the 2023 will be more as compared to the stock of 2022. But if depreciation is more and investment is less, then the stock will fall. But if investment is exactly equal to depreciation, then stock is neither increasing nor it is declining, and that stock will be referred as a steady state. that stock will be referred as the steady state. So steady state is basically that state where stock of capital is neither increasing nor it is declining, but for that purpose investment must be equal to depreciation. So if investment is equal to depreciation, then there will be no change in this capital stock, and that stock of capital will be referred as the steady state. तो न्यूमेरिकल में आपको ये स्टेडी स्टेट कैलकुलेट करने को दिया जाएगा, ठीक है. देयर विल बी अदर पार्ट्स, बट एनी न्यूमेरिकल विल स्टार्ट बेसिकली विथ हाउ टू कैलकुलेट द स्टेडी स्टेट नंबर. सो आई रिपीट, एट स्टेडी स्टेट देयर इज नो चेंज. इफ देयर इज नो चेंज इन द कैपिटल and we said output is a function of capital, so if there is no change in capital there will be no change in output also. If there is no change in capital there will be no change in the output as well. So at a steady state there is no change, at a steady state there is no growth. Steady का concept simply is for me for with respect to time. If economy is at a steady state then the number will remain same for 2022, for 2023, for 2024 and so on. But basically we have to study growth model. We have to find the factor which causes growth in the output. So what causes growth in output even when economy is at a steady state, we are interested in knowing that. तो remember अभी हमने first basic step में सिर्फ कैपिटल को चेंज किया, लेबर फोर्स कांस्टेंट रख रहे हैं और टेक्नोलॉजी को भी कांस्टेंट रख रहे हैं. Over a period, in the second step, third step, we will make labor force variable, and then finally we will make technology also variable. So we have to basically calculate in that form. So I may begin with a simple numerical problem. That will help to understand. Suppose production function is y is equal to capital to the power 0.5, labor to the power 0.5, and a saving rate is 30%, that means 0.3, and depreciation rate is 10%, so it is 0.1. You have to find steady state value of capital per worker. That means we have to find a small k number. Steady state की वैल्यू निकालनी है, small k की वैल्यू. और if you are able to calculate that, you can also calculate a steady state value of output per worker, that is small y. So when you solve it, remember you have to calculate capital per worker, but this is aggregate production function. This is capital K, capital Y. So first thing, you write production function, divide it by labor first. जो भी function होगा उसको labor से divide कर देंगे. Y by L is small y, and this will become K by L to the power 0.5. K by L, you will write it as small k to the power 0.5. So y is equal to under root k. This is your production function. Okay, this will be your production function. Now to find the steady state, we will explain in detail what signifies the steady state, what is the significance of steady state. But if you are just calculating it, then you will say that at a steady state there is no change in the capital stock. So delta K will be equal to 0. But what determines the change in the capital stock? This is basically difference between investment and depreciation, and that must be equal to 0. How much will be investment? That will be determined by saving, and saving is a function of income. Depreciation is D into K. When you equate it with the 0, you can put a star mark. Star basically indicate करेगा steady state के लिए. But what is basically this y? Y is a function of k. So function is basically given in this form. So what you can do, you can write small s. In place of y, you can write अंडर रूट के. क्लियर? जो भी फंक्शन आएगा वो वहां लिख देना. जैसे अगर कहीं फंक्शन आता है 2 अंडर रूट के, तो यहाँ 2 अंडर रूट के लिख देंगे. whatever be the function, you have to write it here. Minus d k star equal to 0. Now you know the saving rate, you know the depreciation rate, you have to calculate the value of k. तो ये k star की वैल्यू कैलकुलेट करनी है. So now you can write it as saving rate upon depreciation rate is equal to k star upon under root k star. Clear? And just substitute the values. In place of saving rate, you can write 0.3, this is 0.1, k star upon under root k star. If you take the square of both side, यहाँ से simplify करके solve कर लेंगे, यहाँ से k star की value मिल जाएगी आपको. ठीक है, and the answer will be coming out to be 9. But if the value of k is 9, then the value of y will be under root 9, that is 3. So the value of y star will be 3. Clear? तो इस तरीके के जो भी क्वेश्चन न्यूमेरिकल का होगा उसमें स्टार्ट एग्रीगेट प्रोडक्शन फंक्शन से होगा एंड यू हैव टू कैलकुलेट फॉर द स्टेडी स्टेट नंबर. उसके बाद जो रिमेनिंग पार्ट्स होंगे वो स्टार्ट. And when you explain it in terms of the graph, then in terms of graph it will be one will be the investment number. So this line is basically small sy. Remember, if in the previous diagram what we draw the production function, this was basically a function y as a function of k, but only a fraction of income is being saved. So if you have to draw the saving line, it will be translated downward, so that will be small sy, and saving will be determining the investment. So if you want to draw the investment line, you have to draw the saving line, and in place of y you can also write function of k. And for depreciation you can draw this line, which is a delta into k. So their equality will determine the steady state. So this is the value of steady state k. Significance is that if the stock of capital is less than steady state, suppose stock of capital is k1, then at that stock we find that depreciation is less and investment is more. So just explain, this stock will decrease because of depreciation, it will increase because of investment. So at a stock of capital k1, investment is more, depreciation is less, so the stock will increase. So next year the stock will be higher and it will continue to increase till it reaches the steady state. And if the stock of capital is more than steady state, then investment will be less and depreciation will be more. So depreciation reduces the stock, so reduction will be more, increase will be less. So in the subsequent period stock of capital will be less, so it will continue to decline. So the stock will keep on changing till it reaches the steady state. In that context we say that steady state is long run equilibrium value. Steady state is long run equilibrium value. So this is basically long run equilibrium of the economy, towards which economy tends to move. Whether economy starts with k1 or k2, it does not matter, it will always end up at steady state. But if economy is at a steady state, then at a steady state we find there is no growth. So if you want to relate in terms of graph, at a steady state I said change in the capital will be 0, and since y is a function of k, so if there is no change in capital there will be no change in output also, so change in y will also be 0. It means if you plot with respect to time, the value of k will remain steady. It will remain same for 2022, 2023 and 2024 onwards. Similarly, the value of y will also remain same for different year. So remember, at steady state we find no growth, but there is no growth. It is not the final conclusion, because this we have arrived at this conclusion keeping labor force constant and keeping technology constant. We stated production as a function of capital and labor, and then it was expressed as a capital to the power alpha, labor to the power 1 minus alpha. So capital को हमने वेरिएबल बना रखा है, टेक्नोलॉजी और लेबर फोर्स को भी कांस्टेंट किया हुआ है. द मोमेंट यू विल मेक टेक्नोलॉजी एंड लेबर वेरिएबल, द कंक्लूजन विल आल्सो बी डिफरेंट. ठीक है, तो हमें एक्सप्लेन बेसिकली इस फॉर्मेट में करना है. तो व्हेन यू स्टार्ट विद दिस चैप्टर नंबर 2, ठीक है, दिस चैप्टर नंबर 2 जोन्स, इनिशियल जो पार्ट है, मतलब ये मॉडल 1956 रोबर्ट सॉलो बेसिकली पब्लिश. तो ये मॉडल बेसिकली अ पार्ट ऑफ न्यू क्लासिकल मॉडल है, मतलब इट इज़ नॉट प्योर क्लासिकल मॉडल, इट हैज़ मॉडिफाइड द क्लासिकल मॉडल. सो सोलो वाज अ न्यू क्लासिकल इकोनॉमिस्ट. इनिशियल जो डिस्क्रिप्शन है वो केस स्टडी के फॉर्म में, एसटी के फॉर्म में, यू कैन इग्नोर दैट पार्ट, बट यू कैन effectively start with this, the basic Solo model. So you have to start the concept from basic Solo model. This is 2.1. In this initial part we will be making capital as a variable, then we will make labor also as a variable, and in the final part we will be explaining the technical progress. And the other concept related to that will be that is based upon Solo model itself, will be the idea of convergence. What is the meaning of level effect, what is the meaning of growth effect, how saving rate will affect steady state, how population growth will affect a steady state, what changes, what will be the impact of technical progress. There is also a concept of golden rule steady state, that means within steady state there is a one particular category. So the topics that we are going to explain in the Solo model, usually it starts with the concept of steady state, level of capital, then effect of saving rate, or you can call it investment rate, and population growth, then effect of technical progress. There will be an idea of convergence. Convergence means Solo model is basically based upon diminishing return. So the economy having more capital will have less margin productivity, and the economy having less capital will have higher margin productivity. So if you consider two different economies, one economy with less capital, other economy with more capital, say at any given point of time, one economy has less capital, other economy has more capital. So the country having more capital will be witnessing diminishing return, and the country having low capital will be having, वहाँ भी डिमिनिशिंग रिटर्न होगा, बट वहाँ पे मार्जिन प्रोडक्टिविटी हायर होगी. तो ये दो अलग अलग लेवल पे हैं. जहाँ कैपिटल का स्टॉक ज़्यादा होगा वहाँ डिमिनिशिंग रिटर्न से ग्रोथ होगा, स्लोअर ग्रोथ रेट. जहाँ स्टॉक कम होगा वहाँ पे हायर रेट से ग्रोथ होगा. So the gap that you are witnessing in 2022 will not be there in 2050. So this gap will narrow down. So economy will converge. So that is basically the idea of convergence. So convergence will be an important part. And one more topic that will be explained will be the golden rule concept. ठीक है, तो इस golden rule वहाँ पे भी further simplification, plus there is one more topic is in terms of the total factor productivity, which is also known as the Solo residual. what determine solo residual, what is the significance of solo residual. तो ये अलग मतलब ग्रोथ अकाउंटिंग का इक्वेशन होगा इन टर्म्स ऑफ द ग्रोथ अकाउंटिंग. जस्ट ब्रीफली, y is equal to a capital to the power alpha labor to the power 1 minus alpha है. तो आउटपुट अगर इन तीनों का फंक्शन है, so growth in output will depend upon growth of a, growth of capital and growth of labor. All three will contribute in the growth rate of GDP. Labor force contribution we can measure. Capital, ये भी physical capital है, so you can also quantify and calculate. But technology is basically in terms of ideas. वो tangible नहीं है. तो अगर हमें suppose economy का growth rate, if you find that the growth rate of Indian economy is 6.5, and out of that growth, labor is contributing 2%, capital is contributing 1.5%, then the residual must be contributed by the technology. So technical progress is basically the solo residual. वो लेबर और कैपिटल की प्रोडक्टिविटी को डिटरमाइन करता है. जैसे अगर आप कोई फंक्शन लिखते हैं, कैपिटल टू द पावर 0.5, लेबर टू द पावर 0.5, suppose you write this production function for one particular, suppose you write it for Indian economy, we write another production function with same number for China. अब दोनों इकोनॉमी में अगर सेम अमाउंट ऑफ कैपिटल एंड लेबर है, but here I write 2 and here I write 3. So if both country has same amount of capital and labor, same K, same L in both countries, even then the output will be different. तो जहाँ पे ये नंबर A की जगह यहाँ 3 लिखा है, यहाँ A की जगह 2 लिखा है, जहाँ पे A की वैल्यू ग्रेटर होगी, in that country output will be more. So with same capital and labor, if you are able to produce more of output, it means productivity of capital and labor is more. So A is basically, A that is technology is also showing the productivity of capital and labor. उसे total factor productivity भी कहते हैं. ठीक है, तो वो सारे पॉइंट्स इस ग्रोथ अकाउंटिंग के इक्वेशन में भी आएंगे. We will start basically with 2.1. In this class I have just given an overview in the first class without any dictation, although I will be providing you detailed notes how to write in the examination content wise और proper जो detail होंगे. So it will be starting with 2.1, and then to build this model equation will be explained. Then you have to explain the solo diagram. We have just explained that diagram, and then the impact of saving rate change and population growth rate impact, and then we will be dealing in the subsequent class basically the properties of the steady state. Okay, properties of steady state explain करेंगे. So I think you have the basic idea of the model, not the complete model, but you have the basic idea what we are going to explain here. Clear? तो डिटेल में डिस्क्रिप्शन होता है, मतलब क्लास नोट्स प्रॉपरली होंगे, जो न्यूमेरिकल प्रॉब्लम्स हैं उनके आपको सॉल्यूशन मिल जाएंगे. आप रेफर अगर करना चाहें तो लास्ट, बिकॉज प्रीवियस ईयर आप क्वेश्चन देखे होंगे, देन यू विल फाइंड क्वेश्चन फ्रॉम द मैन क्यू. सो इफ यू वांट टू सी द सॉल्यूशन ऑफ दोस 2 चैप्टर जो पूरा ओल्ड सिलेबस के थे, क्वेश्चन के लिए आई थिंक प्रैक्टिस करने के लिए रेलिवेंट है. आंसर लिखते समय आपको लिखना जोन्स के अकॉर्डिंगली, बट आप पढ़ने के लिए वहाँ से भी रेफर कर सकते हैं. उसके प्रॉब्लम्स और एप्लीकेशन दो चैप्टर 7 और 8 के वो भी साइट पे अपलोड कर देंगे, यू कैन रेफर टू दैट आल्सो. क्लियर? सो विल बी कंटिन्यूइंग विद दिस स्टडी स्टेट. आज की क्लास में जैसे हमने बेसिक पॉइंट एक्सप्लेन कर रखा है सोलो मॉडल का, एंड इन डिटेल विद डिक्टेशन विल बी कंटिन्यूइंग दिस. क्लियर? In case of any problem related to the lecture or related to any query, of micro and macro, you can call me directly on this number. For econometrics you can call it on and for any admission related query you can call on this 2 number as well as on although classes आप ऑनलाइन अगर एक्सेस कर रहे हैं तो ऑनलाइन इफ यू वांट टू बाय यू कैन जस्ट सिंपली ऐड टू कार्ट योर कोर्स एंड यू कैन बाय दैट कोर्स ऑनलाइन डायरेक्टली. If you require any particular assistance, you can call and WhatsApp on this number or any other number, and we will be sending you the admission link. By using that link also you can take admission. So it is up to you, it is your choice. मतलब आप डायरेक्टली ऐड टू कार्ड करके साइट से भी डायरेक्टली बाय कर सकते हैं और डायरेक्टली कांटेक्ट करके हमसे एडमिशन का लिंक भी ले सकते हैं. क्लियर? कोई भी क्वेरी अगर कंटेंट रिलेटेड है, related to micro and macro, then you can call on this number. For econometrics you can call on this number and you can talk to Amit sir. Clear? So I hope I address all your concern in this first orientation class. Thank you.